Hi everyone, welcome to javatechie. In this tutorial, I will guide you how to install Minikube in Windows operating system, and also I will demonstrate how to deploy your first Spring Boot application in Kubernetes cluster. Okay, I am supposed to demonstrate this using Mac operating system, but it seems maximum viewers requested to do the same on Windows. So if any Mac user is watching this video, don't worry, I will cover a separate session for installing Minikube in Mac operating system. Okay, before we install this Minikube, first let's understand what this Minikube is and why we need it, right? So let me quickly brush up the basic architecture of pod, node and cluster to explain you why we need Minikube. As we know, in Kubernetes we have a cluster, and inside this cluster we can have either single node or we can have multiple node, and inside this node we can have a single pod or we can have multiple pod inside this node, and again inside this pod either we can have a single containers or we can have multiple containers, and this container is the platform where you can run your application. The application can be Spring Boot or it can be Angular or any technology specific application you can run inside containers which is present inside pods. Okay, now if you understand this basic architecture, to run an application in Kubernetes you need this cluster infrastructure, like you need pod nodes in your machine, right? How will you get this infrastructure? That's where this Minikube utility or tool came into picture. To run Kubernetes cluster in your local machine or computer, you need to install this Minikube tool. Minikube runs a single node Kubernetes cluster on your machine so that you can try out Kubernetes for your daily development work. So if you install Minikube, then you will get a cluster and node. Then you can host any containerized application inside it. So let's try this out. First step, we need to install Minikube. So let me walk you through the steps of installation process. If I'll move to the next slide, these are the links we need to open to download all the required component or to set up Minikube in Windows operating system. Okay, so let me open all the link. I'll just copy this link, then I'll go to my Chrome browser and I can open it. Let me copy all the required link. I'll also open the second one, install Minikube. Okay, so install and set up kubectl. So what kubectl is does, kubectl is a command line tool. Using kubectl we can connect to Kubernetes cluster from our local machine. Okay, so that's the reason first we need to install this kubectl command line tool. And for Windows you can directly download the latest release version. Just click on this, it will download the kubectl.exe. Now next step, you need to install the Minikube utility for Windows. Okay, so just click on this Windows. This is what installing Minikube. Just click on this. Now if you scroll down, you can find this Minikube Windows AMD 64, right? Just right click on it, open it in a new tab. Now if you scroll down, for Windows, yeah, this is what for Windows, right? Minikube Windows AMD 64.exe. Just download it. Once you download this, then as per the documentation, rename it to the minikube.exe. Okay, so let me go to the download folder. Then I'll just rename this to the minikube.exe. Just click on the rename and I'll just add Minikube. So I can remove everything here. Fine. Now the next step, Minikube and kubectl, these are the two exe files you downloaded. Now let me copy these two files. Then I will create a separate folder inside any directory. So I will just create a folder inside C. Now I will just create a folder with name. Let me open the folder. I'll just name it Minikube. Inside this particular Minikube folder, I will paste these two exe files. Okay. Now go to the download. I just want to delete these two. Okay. Now if you'll go inside the C, inside the Minikube, we have these two exe files, kubectl and Minikube. Okay. Now to access this kubectl and Minikube directly from the command prompt, I need to set this path to my environment variable, right? So just copy this and just type in command prompt environment. You can see here edit environment variable for your account. Just click on this, then click on path, click on edit, just add a new, just paste it. Okay, C colon Minikube. Now click on OK, click on OK. Let me close this. Now let me open a command prompt. Then here I'll just type Minikube version. So if you observe, this is what the Minikube version we just installed, right? And we can able to see that particular version. Now we are done with the Minikube setup in Windows. Now the next step, you need to start this Minikube. So to start a Minikube, there is multiple drivers provided by Kubernetes. You can use any of them. Let me tell you all the available driver to start a Minikube. Now if you will go up, installing Minikube, there is a multiple driver. You can use Hyper-V, you can use VirtualBox, or you can use Docker. Now this Hyper-V will not applicable for all the Windows version. If you are using Windows 10 Enterprise or Windows 10 Professional or Windows 10 Education, then only you can use this Hyper-V driver. Okay. If you want to use the VirtualBox, you should have enough space on your machine. Minimum you should have 16 GB RAM to use this VirtualBox. Since I have installed Docker on my machine earlier, I can directly use the Docker as a driver to start the Minikube. So to start Minikube with Docker driver, I can directly copy this command. Then I need to go to the command prompt, then paste it, and then change the driver as a Docker here. Okay, but make sure Docker must need to be installed on your machine and it will up and running. Okay, now let me run this command. It will take few seconds or few minutes to start the Minikube. Minimum for me it took 2 to 3 minutes when I tried it before. So let's wait it to complete. If you observe here, preparing Kubernetes, this is what the version. Okay, on Docker 20.10.7, this is my Docker version. Okay, so it almost took more than 3 minutes. Let's wait it to complete. So if you observe, done. Kubectl is now configured to use Minikube cluster and default namespace by default. So it took around 4.5 minutes for me to start this particular Minikube. Now to verify Minikube started successfully, you can check Minikube status. Just enter it. You can see here host running, kubelet running, API server running, and kube config configured. You should see this status. Okay. Then you can confirm that your Minikube started successfully without having any error or any issue. So we are good here. We started the Minikube. Now as per the documentation, we understand once we start the Minikube, it will just create a single node cluster, right? So to verify that whether it created a cluster and a single node or not, what I can do, I can just type Minikube, not Minikube, kubectl cluster info, so that it will show me the information about cluster. You can see here Kubernetes control panel is running this, kube DNS is running this. This is what my cluster info. Now let's verify the node. It should provide us a single node, right? So you can fire a command kubectl get node. You can see here the name of the node is Minikube, status is ready, these are the rules, and age, these are the version. So as per the Minikube documentation, it just provides us a single node cluster. This is what the node and this is what the cluster. Now we are done with our setup, Kubernetes setup in our local machine. Now we are good to go with the deployment. Okay, so let's quickly create a Spring Boot project to deploy that to the Kubernetes cluster. Now let me go to my IntelliJ IDE. Already I created one small hello world kind of example where I have only one endpoint and I am just exposing a string message here. Okay, congratulations, successfully deployed your application to Kubernetes. And also if you observe, I just created a Docker file. Now the first step, I need to dockerize this particular application. Then from the Docker repo, I just need to pull this image and I just need to run it inside Kubernetes cluster, right? So first I need to dockerize this application. Now how Kubernetes will read your Docker repository? So to allow Kubernetes to read your Docker repository, we need to run a command. We just need to fire a command minikube and tell the environment which I am using. Okay, just enter it. Next, just copy the last one and just add it, then execute it. Now Kubernetes can read your local Docker repository. Now if I'll type Docker images, you can see these images specific to the Kubernetes. Kube proxy, Kube API server, Kube scheduler, Kube controller manager. These are the master node components, right? Then Kubernetes UI dashboard, etcd, metric scraper, something. There is lot of Kubernetes images, right? Now we give permission to Kubernetes to read my Docker repository. Now we can create the Docker image of our application. So what I'll do, I'll just move to the particular directory where I have this Docker. So I'll just copy the path here. From here I can directly move to that particular directory. Okay, let me clear everything. Now I just need to build a Docker image of this particular application, Spring Boot k8s demo, and we have the Docker file here, right? These are the Docker file. Now let me go to the command prompt. So here I will just type docker build -t, then give the image name. So I will just give Spring Boot k8s demo or something like that, and I will just specify the version 1.0 and root directory. Just enter it. It will take few seconds. It is creating the Docker image. Yeah, so if you observe, it created the Docker image. Now to verify that, you can type Docker images and you can see this image, right? This is just what we created 12 seconds ago. Okay, so we have the Spring Boot image with us. Now we just want to run this particular image inside the pod, right? So for that, you need to create a deployment object. As you know, deployments are Kubernetes objects that are used for managing the pods. We can describe deployment object details using YML file, or you can directly use the command prompt. For this example, I will just use the command prompt. In my next tutorial, I will show you how you can create the deployment and service with the help of YML configuration. Okay. Now let's quickly create a deployment object using the command prompt. So I can directly type the command kubectl. Okay. Then create deployment. Give the name of your deployment. So I'll just give Spring Boot k8s. Okay. And just tell Kubernetes to read your image, which is the Docker image, right? So I can just specify image, give the name of your image, which is Spring Boot k8s demo, paste it and give the version as well 1.0, right? And then specify the port, which is 8080. So with the above command, we are telling to Kubernetes create a deployment with name Spring Boot k8s. Okay, and then read the Docker image, which is Spring Boot k8s demo with the version 1.0, and run this inside a pod. Okay, so just enter it. It will create a deployment for you. So you can see here deployment.apps Spring Boot k8s created. This is what my deployment object created. Now let me zoom this. Let's verify the deployments. Okay, so you can type kubectl get deployment. You can observe here, this is the name of the deployment, and the status you can see it's in ready state. Okay, one by one, and up to date one, available one. This is the age. Fine. Now you can describe your deployments. You can see all the replicas and everything, all the description about your deployment. So you can just type kubectl get deployment description or kubectl describe deployment and give the name of your deployment, which is Spring Boot k8s. So you can see this is what the description of your deployment. You can see here, right? New replica set, one by one replica set was created because you didn't specify the replicas. And then this is what the deployment controller scaled up replica set Spring Boot. This is what the pod you can say. Okay, I'll show you the pod as well. Now to ensure that Kubernetes successfully pull my Docker image and run it inside a pods, we can execute a below command kubectl get pods. You can check the status of your pods. Just enter it. You can see here, this is what your pod name, and one by one status is ready, and you can see the status is running here. Fine. It means the Docker image which we created, Kubernetes is able to pull that particular image when you create the deployment object, and it created a pod, and inside a pod it just started a single container and it just execute your particular image. To verify that, what I'll do, I'll just check the log of this particular pod. Okay, I'll just type kubectl logs, then give the name of your pods. You can see here it started your Spring Boot application. Now your Spring Boot application is running inside the pod container. Now we should have any option, or you should find a way to access that particular URL, right? So what we can do, we need to create a service object, and to create a service object we need to expose the current deployment with specific service type. Okay, so that the application can be accessed outside from this cluster, right? So what I need to do, I just need to expose the deployment which we just created. So if you type kubectl get deployments, so this is what the deployment, we just need to expose that particular deployment to create a service object, right? So what I can do, kubectl then expose deployment, give the name of your deployment, just paste it, and then specify the service type. So if you remember, while explaining the component of Kubernetes, I mentioned there is few service type like node port, load balancer. There is few service type, right? So in this particular example, I'll just use the node port. Okay, service type is node port. So kubectl expose deployment, name of your deployment, then specify the service type. Just enter it. You can see here service Spring Boot k8s exposed. Now if I'll type kubectl get service, you can see here, right? This is what your service name, and the service type is node port, and then this is what the cluster IP, external IP, and this is what the port we are exposing, right? Now what is the role of this particular service here with type node port? As you know, all the traffic will come to the service first, then service will redirect your request to the corresponding ports based on available. That is what we understand about service component, right? And this is what the service we created. Since we have only one port, we can directly get the service URL to access that particular endpoint. So for that, what I can do, I can directly use Minikube, give the service name. So I'll directly give the service name. Then you can add the service name here, get the URL. Just enter it. You will get the service URL or proxy URL to access your endpoint. Starting tunnel for service Spring Boot k8s. These are the URL with which you can able to access your container which is running inside a pod. So let me copy this URL. Both are the same URL. You can copy any of them. Copy this, go to the browser, open a new tab, then paste the URL. You are getting the 404 Spring Boot related error, right? Now just verify the endpoint. Go to your controller class. This is what we dockerized this particular application, right? So I'll just try the same endpoint. Let me add it here. You can see we are getting the message here. Congratulations, you successfully deployed your application to Kubernetes. And this is what we are returning from our endpoint, right? So now we are able to access the containers from which is running in our Kubernetes pod. Now also you can visualize health or status of your each component pod node of your Kubernetes. So to check the health, what you can do, I can directly use the dashboard, Minikube dashboard. Okay, so let me kill this. I'll just run Minikube dashboard. This is just an user interface where you can see all the node and their status, like all the components and their status. It will take few seconds to show you the Minikube dashboard or Kubernetes dashboard. So if you observe, this is what the dashboard URL. Let me copy this dashboard URL. Then it's opening in my default. Let me close this. I just want to open it in a Chrome. Let's go to the Chrome, open a new tab, just paste it, okay, and run it. Yeah, so if you observe, let me minimize this. This is what my Kubernetes dashboard. Here you can see the deployment object, pods and replica set. So only we are not creating any replica set as of now. We have a single replica set is running, which is single pod. Okay, this is what the deployment object. You can see all the memory and resources related stuff. Now click on workload. These are the pods. Now there, as I already explained while explaining the component of Kubernetes, there is a concept called self-healing in Kubernetes. It means if I delete a pod, then immediately it will start a new pod. So I'll just show you that as well. See this, it's just started a new pod. Now if I'll show you the logs, it's starting the Spring Boot application again. It means it just started a new pod with a new IP address. That is what called self-healing in Kubernetes. Now in 20 seconds it's up and running. You can see here. It's now green status. And we don't have any replica set as of now. Even we didn't create any namespace. And we are using default namespace. Okay. You just deploy your code to the Kubernetes cluster and then start exploring more about this Kubernetes dashboard. There is lot of component mentioned here like job, pods, deployment, daemon sets, config map. We'll explore all the component one by one. Okay. So whatever the steps I mentioned in this video, same I already explained over the Medium blog. I'll share this link in video description. You guys can refer this. In my next tutorial, I will show you how you can deploy your Spring Boot application to the Kubernetes. We'll do the same example, but rather than using command prompt, I will just show you how you can use the YML configuration to create deployment object and service object. Okay, so before end this session, let's clean up all the components which we created. Go to the terminal. Let me do the Ctrl Z, Ctrl C. Just type CLS. Now we just need to delete the deployment. We just need to delete the service, everything. Okay, so you can just type kubectl delete service. Give the name of your service, which is Spring Boot k8s, or there is something like Spring Boot, right? Spring Boot k8s. Similar way, we need to delete the deployment. So let it complete first. You can see here service Spring Boot k8 is deleted. Now we just need to delete the deployment. sorry, I typed the wrong command. It should be delete deployment. Yeah, so we deleted the deployment. It's not mandatory to do this, but it's good to do the cleanup. Okay, because in our machine we don't have enough space to keep those information. Now, if you'll verify kubectl get pods, we don't have any pods. Okay, now if we'll type kubectl get service, we have only Kubernetes service which is up and running. We don't have any other services. Similarly, you can verify get deployments. We don't have anything, right? Now the next we need to stop the Minikube. Then we can delete the Minikube. So to stop a Minikube, we can type Minikube stop. So once you run this command, it stops a local Kubernetes cluster. Okay. Then let's wait it to complete. So you can see here one node stopped. Okay. Now if I'll type kubectl get nodes, we are getting this error because there is no Minikube which is in started mode. Okay. Now I just need to delete the Minikube. So I can type Minikube delete. It will delete a local Kubernetes cluster, and this command also delete the VM and it remove all the associates file. Okay. You can see here deleting Minikube in Docker, deleting container in Minikube. Okay. It will take few seconds to stop and delete the Minikube. Yeah. You can see it remove all the associate file and VM. That's all about this particular video, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Meet you soon with a new concept.